Is it possible for a single TikToker to tarnish how people view an entire neurological disorder? Well, if that TikToker is Tics and Roses, then sadly, yes. They started as a wholesome disability awareness influencer sharing their daily life with Tourette's syndrome, only to end up getting raked over the coals at the hands of their own followers, when one viral video completely exposed them for being a total fraud, someone who was faking their entire disorder just for TikTok clout. Hi, I'm the Internet Anarchist. I create weekly YouTube documentaries, and today we'll be diving into the satisfying and well-deserved downfall of Tics and Roses, how they profited off the sympathy of their own followers through a bogus diagnosis, where they ended up after the dust settled, and the real-life consequences others with the same disorder had to face because of their vile actions. At a first glance, Tics and Roses, created by Emerald Rose, came across as fairly innocent. The account was focused around helping Emerald share the struggles they face on a day-to-day basis, living with Tourette's syndrome. Emerald claimed that they had been diagnosed with Tourette's at a very young age.
So for me, my tics started when I was probably around 6 or 7.
And had created the Tics and Roses account to create awareness for the disorder, break any harmful stereotypes, and show people that they weren't alone. The content in these early days also echoed this sentiment, with Emerald showing all the various tics they had to contend with, how they completed various tasks while ticking, and how embarrassing it felt to tick in public. It wasn't long before the channel found its audience, and by mid-2021, Tics and Roses amassed over 530,000 followers, cementing Emerald as an icon in the disability awareness community on the platform. Emerald used this newfound popularity to launch a merch line related to their disability, all in an effort to create even more awareness for Tourette's. To add to that, they also started promoting their other account on TikTok, Stardust Pagan Priory, which corresponded to their pagan yarn dyeing business, effectively turning many of their fans into paying customers. Things were going incredibly well for Emerald. However, as they continued posting new content on Tics and Roses, the followers who'd been watching their content for real Tourette's awareness started noticing something odd about their videos.
Let's see if I can catch this tick, because it's the most ridiculous thing ever.
Put simply, many of Emerald's videos felt fake, or at least highly exaggerated. As the suspicions grew stronger, these viewers started looking into older Tics and Roses videos as well, and even created an entire subreddit to uncover the truth on May 3rd, 2021. Together, they scoured through all of her past videos until finally accumulating enough evidence to expose Emerald as a fraud in front of their followers, eventually forcing them to delete the Tics and Roses account entirely. However, while that did stop them from generating any more clout from their fake Tourette's diagnosis for the time being, there was nothing stopping them from taking a brief hiatus and coming back with a brand new persona, just like several other cancelled content creators have tried in the past, especially since the r/Tics and Roses subreddit was only made up of 2.6k members at the time. Fortunately, before that could happen, the situation caught the attention of Sunny V2, who would end up putting the final nail in the coffin that was Emerald's TikTok career by posting a video on February 10th, 2022 titled "The Scumbag TikToker Who Faked Tourette's for Clout," where he would go on to double down on the subreddit's efforts and completely expose Emerald as a fraud for the second time, but this time in front of a much larger audience, since the video ended up going mega viral, amassing 16 million views, eventually turning every single one of Emerald's followers and the entire online community against them. He called her out for three main things: their long history of faking Tourette's for clout, fabricating a doctor's report to boost the legitimacy of their claim, and even getting called a liar by their own family, using the evidence that had already been collected by the original source, the r/Tics and Roses subreddit, who were the first to point out how fake and exaggerated Emerald's tics looked, specifically how their tics seemed to be too well timed according to the context of the situation to be random.
Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! Wake up!
As if they'd been playing up their condition for the camera in a carefully controlled performance, especially considering how often they'd post between tics and reacted to their own tics like they'd been expecting them.
Oh god! Moving on. Send me
Get her a new one. Wow! 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 Eat the burrito. No. One for you!
Like in this video, for example, where they're driving while ticking constantly, but are somehow able to maintain complete control over their vehicle the entire time, with several Redditors pointing out how a person with such severe tics shouldn't be driving, let alone filming themselves, with comments that read, "Oh, I'm having a severe tic attack while driving, better get my phone out," and "Damn, I only experience moderate physical tics, but I'm not allowed to drive or be in the passenger seat since I tend to accidentally hit the driver. Sucks that she's spreading lies about this." Or another video where they're essentially making fun of the entire disorder by narrating nursery rhymes while having very context-specific tics, which seem more like the punchline to a joke than a random occurrence.
5 little monkeys jumping on the bed. One fell down. He's dead now. Bye-bye. Hickory dickory dock. The mouse ran up the clock and stole his cock.
Prompting Redditors to point out how no one with actual Tourette's would act this way, with many commenting, "I love how conveniently the tics always seem to demonstrate themselves on cue/camera, and interesting how our tics relate and line up perfectly with the rhymes." However, this was only the tip of the iceberg, because as the subreddit continued unearthing TikToks in which they blatantly exaggerate their own tics, they started doing a deep dive on Emerald themselves, trying to discover any past video that could conclusively prove that they were lying about having Tourette's entirely, and soon enough, their search started producing results. They first found a 1 minute 54-second video on Emerald's business Facebook page for Stardust Fiber Studio, where they speak throughout the video without ticking even once.
We are wrapping up with planting all of the little seedlings now. He's finishing up with the broccoli right now, or cauliflower.
However, since the camera was never facing them, there was no way to prove they weren't ticking at all during the video. On top of that, as Sunny explained it, Emerald themselves came forward on TikTok to dispel any rumors, by claiming that they did not tick all of the time, and it was possible for them to make a short video without ticking.
You should check out her YouTube, Stardust Fiber Studio, and take note of how she doesn't have a tick in any of the videos. Maybe you'll think twice. To which she would respond, "Hey, so this is a comment I saw a lot and I wanted to clear up a few things," before explaining that the tics didn't happen all the time and that it was possible for her to make short videos without any involuntary outbursts.
And so the controversy died down for a time. However, that didn't stop the people from continuing their search, which led them to eventually finding crystal clear evidence that Emerald was in fact a fraud. You see, alongside her alternate TikTok account named Stardust Pagan Priory, Emerald also ran a YouTube channel by the same name, and while searching this channel, fans managed to find a 4-minute and another full 11 minutes long video where she was able to talk completely tick-free.
Welcome to Stardust Fiber Studio. I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Emerald.
And today, we're going to be unboxing 76 pounds of yarn.
76.
Compared to the videos on Emerald's Tics and Roses account, where they would tick every 5 to 6 seconds, it became extremely obvious that they were putting on an act. And if that wasn't bad enough, someone on the same thread even managed to find a full 1-hour-long podcast that they had been on to promote their yarn dyeing business. And in a surprise to no one at that point, Emerald didn't even tick once during this entire recording.
Which isn't happened for many, many years. I myself was raised pagan from birth. Yes, you can buy yarn anywhere, but you don't know the intention that was put into it. Being able to dye yarn with intention, especially like our Greek god series we did, all of those were acts of devotion.
Also, remember the controversial nursery rhymes video earlier where Emerald seemed to tick during every sentence? Well, they also managed to unearth another video of Emerald reciting poetry, only this time she didn't even tick once during this more than 2 minutes long video.
When I catch you staring through the window, I want to pour the contents of your mind into a glass and drink you in. I want to hear your voice in my heartbeat.
But once again, despite all this evidence, there was still a chance that Emerald would be able to explain all these videos away by stating that their tics weren't that bad in the past, so they could keep them under control for an extended period of time. So people continued digging, and eventually managed to find a piece of evidence that finally had them dead to rights. In this Reddit post titled "A Collection of Proof and Information About Tics and Roses Claims," that found a couple of videos posted just minutes apart from each other. One was posted on the Tics and Roses account, and the other on her alternate Stardust Pagan Priory TikTok account. And as you might have guessed already, in the Tics and Roses video, Emerald was seen ticking uncontrollably, while in the video on her alternate account, they were completely tick-free.
Tonight the moon is in its first quarter phase. This is an interesting time for looking at things like self-growth
and decisions that you need to make.
However, just when it seemed like the people had had them cornered, the same subreddit managed to uncover a video that actually worked in Emerald's favor. This was from May 2019, 2 years before Emerald started becoming popular on TikTok, showing Emerald confessing that they had Huntington's disease.
My name is Emerald, and I have Huntington's disease. It affects all aspects of a person's life. It causes movement disorders, such as involuntary jerking, impaired gait and balance, and difficulty with speech and swallowing.
Now, since this video was uploaded way before Emerald had any major following on social media, people found it difficult to write off as fake, especially because of how genuinely emotional Emerald seemed towards the end of the video.
I still fear for my loved ones and the effect that my decline will someday have on them. But I am choosing not to let this disease have me before its time. I am choosing to live. So yes, I have Huntington's disease. But Huntington's disease doesn't have me. Thank you.
And since the early symptoms of Huntington's can often present themselves as symptoms of Tourette's, some members of the subreddit started doubting themselves for calling Emerald a liar. In his video, SunnyV2 also pointed out how this sentiment was further reinforced when the Redditors uncovered a GoFundMe-style fundraiser, asking people to donate so Emerald could get their Huntington's treated.
Reddit users found an old Huntington's disease fundraiser from October 2014 hosted by Emerald, which stated Huntington's disease is something that affects my entire family. My grandfather was diagnosed and shortly after my mother as well. I'm doing this walk for my grandfather, for my mother, and for those in my family that have the potential for having this disease as well.
So, for the time being, the backlash died down and people started wondering if they were being a bit too harsh with Emerald, but it wasn't long before they started finding inconsistencies with the Huntington's diagnosis as well. You see, to be diagnosed with Tourette's, you can't have any symptoms due to another medical condition, especially Huntington's, which meant that even if their Huntington's diagnosis was true, they had still falsely claimed to be diagnosed with Tourette's, and that ended up opening the floodgates once again, with several of their followers calling Emerald out on TikTok once again. But instead of finally coming clean, Emerald decided to double down on their claims in an act of desperation, something that eventually ended up backfiring horribly. This time, they came out with another TikTok showing a doctor's report they had received from their latest outpatient consultation, just to prove that they really had Tourette's.
So I know you've all probably seen the chaos happening on my channel, so I wanted to show a little bit of my last outpatient consultation. So I did do some redactions for, personal safety reasons. So make sure you guys can see that.
At a first glance, this report looked quite legitimate, leading most of their critics to back off for a time being. However, once again, it didn't take long for Sunny himself and the people on r/Tics and Roses subreddit to find several inconsistencies in the report, like how some diagnoses for PTSD were mentioned twice, and how for some reason their doctor had thought it very important to specifically mention that Emerald was a quote very pleasant 27-year-old left-handed lady in the personal history section. A Redditor even mentioned a more basic problem with the diagnosis themselves, by pointing out another rookie mistake the so-called doctor had made in a comment that read, OCD with anxiety disorder is just flat out wrong. OCD is an anxiety disorder, and an anxiety disorder is not a diagnosis. It is a family of diagnoses. You would have to say generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, or unspecified or something. This is not how anyone would code or write this. But in the end, it was SunnyV2 who had pointed out the biggest mistake Emerald had made. It all started with him finding a harmless-looking comment on that same TikTok, with one of their followers asking them if they went to the same hospital as they did.
Hey, no hey, just curious. I went to Virginia Mason in Seattle a few weeks ago and my paperwork had a different logo on it. Did you go to a different one?
This prompted Sunny to actually pay closer attention to the logo on the form itself, which in turn led to him discovering that the official Virginia Mason logo had a small TM next to it, something that was missing from the logo on Emerald's report. So after a bit of digging, he found that the logo on Emerald's report was actually the first transparent background logo you could find on Google, proving that Emerald had most likely typed up the document themselves. For the Redditors, however, the inconsistent and outright weird language in the report, coupled with Emerald's history, was enough to declare the report fake, with one Redditor actually posting the TikTok on the subreddit with the sarcastic title, "She has a color printer, I'm super convinced," which actually raises an even bigger concern about the consequences Emerald's desperate stunt could have, specifically how reluctant it might make the internet when it comes to accepting someone else's diagnosis, even if they aren't actually lying like Emerald was. But of course, Emerald never never cared about that. They didn't even have the decency to come clean after their document was outed as fake. All they did was delete their doctor's report video and continue posting as usual. Fortunately, the truth did eventually come out about them, and that too from the person they'd least expect, their sister. Noticing the rising popularity of the Tics and Roses subreddit, Emerald's sister decided to share her story under the username Jade401, with a post titled "Introducing Myself and the Truth" that read, "Hi everyone, I'm Emerald's sister and we grew up together. My mother and I have always been supportive of Emerald and miss them dearly. We have always accepted them, they cut communication with us, we have tried to reach out, but they no longer wish to have contact with us and we haven't talked in years." She then went on to confirm that her family had struggled with Huntington's, especially her mother and grandfather. And although she did confirm that Emerald had tested positive for Huntington's, she completely denied their Tourette's diagnosis, stating, "I don't believe Emerald has Tourette syndrome and they never showed any symptoms as a child. They are mentally ill though. I love my sister, always will, and wish them the best, but I don't agree with what they have done. It's incredibly disrespectful to fake a mental illness for any reason. I'm extending my sincerest apology to everyone their actions have hurt." She also mentioned that she was open to any questions as long as they weren't disrespectful, to which a Redditor asked, "Do you know why Emerald might have fabricated all of this? Did they have a tendency to want attention regardless of it being good or bad?" And she responded with, "Yes, they do have a history of fabricating stories or stretching the truth, so to speak. These revelations pushed Emerald's reputation past the point of no return, because if your own family is calling you a liar, there's not much you can say to make people believe you." However, surprisingly, Emerald still tried in a yap session that boiled down to them dismissing everything their sister had said, and crying about how all these quote-unquote lies have ruined their life, before announcing that they were going to delete all Tourette's-related content from the internet. Surprisingly, Emerald stayed true to their word, and ended up deleting their Tics and Roses TikTok account entirely. However, most of the internet still wasn't satisfied with the way Emerald had left, because they never actually admitted to faking Tourette's, and instead claimed that they had to leave because of the hate. On top of that, they were still posting consistently on their alternate Stardust Pagan Priory business accounts on both YouTube and TikTok.
Hello and happy Pride to all of our pagans and witches that are in the community. I wanted to talk a little bit about the terminology used, seeing as I myself am non-binary.
Eventually, the backlash became too much for Emerald to bear, forcing them to disappear from there as well. However, even in their final video, they refused to take any accountability.
I was not planning to address this anymore because addressing it has not fixed it. I was literally bullied off the internet. So I do not do awareness for Tourette's anymore, regardless of the fact that I do have a clinical diagnosis. So I'm spending my time on my yarn business and on my religious group, and I just want to live my life, and yeah.
But fortunately, that would be the last time the internet would have to see them, since they haven't shown their face in a video ever since. That said, even in the aftermath of Sunny V2's video, which had managed to make a huge mainstream audience aware of Emerald's fraud, they still continued posting on their Stardust Fiber Studio page on Instagram. But that didn't last long either, because Sunny V2's video soon caught the attention of another YouTuber, Daps, who actually did suffer from Tourette's. Daps ended up making a video on the topic as well, titled "Guy with Real Tourette's reacts to TikToker faking Tourette's," breaking down why most of Emerald's tics seemed fake.
Oh god! Moving on. Send me to Canada!
Not only did he call out how unrealistic these tics looked, but also pointed out how Emerald would often find their tics unnaturally funny.
Alright, so the first thing I noticed is, yeah, this does scream very fake. A lot of the, like, the putting that hat in your head, like, I want to go to Canada, that doesn't happen. Also, another thing is, if this were happening to me, and, like, I were having such severe tics while trying to package something, I would not be happy like she is. I would be pissed the fuck off.
Surprisingly, Daps's video ended up going even more viral than Sunny's did, garnering over 34 million views, which ended up in Emerald finally deleting all their Stardust Fiber Studio social media accounts, and effectively destroyed any possibility of them ever returning to the world of content creation ever again. That said, even though they themselves are gone, their impact on the internet unfortunately remains, often resulting in other YouTubers diagnosed with Tourette's getting hate for, quote, faking it, like Tics and Roses, like Ticking Together, who has had to prove she has Tourette's several times since the Tics and Roses news came out.
Hi, I'm Carly, and I have Tourette syndrome. I am not a fraud, but because of those lovely few people out there who have fake Tourette's, on every single one of my videos, I get a bunch of freaking hate. And all I'm trying to do is raise awareness and break the stigma that surrounds this awfully misunderstood disorder. But on almost, I got race. But on almost every one of my videos, I get a comment saying, fake, this doesn't seem real. Or the worst ones are, I don't know who to believe now that I've seen Tics and Roses.
And has even been confused with Emerald.
I have been mistaken or kind of called Tics and Roses 2 times in my personal life in public, which is crazy to me. The first instance was when I was at work about a year ago. I was working at the cash register and a girl comes up to me and she's like, do I know you? And I was like, I'm not sure, like, did we go to the same high school? Like, maybe we met somewhere. And she's like, no, wait, you're Tics and Roses. And I was like, no.
Which is quite tragic considering how misunderstood Tourette already is and the stigma surrounding it. And unfortunately, it looks like none of the people with actual Tourette's who got hurt by Tics and Roses' fraudulent portrayal of the disorder will ever get any closure, since they never even apologized for their actions and instead tried to gaslight everyone on their way out. The only silver lining in this whole citation is that the internet will most likely never have to see or hear from them ever again, kind of like Only Jayus, who also tried to use her alleged mental illnesses as an excuse for bad behavior. Click the video on screen to find out more.